You're not tired because life is hard. You're tired because you keep chasing people who are not walking with you, chasing their attention, chasing their approval, chasing their replies, their validation, their presence. In Buddhism, suffering does not come from pain itself. It comes from attachment. And right now, your exhaustion is not physical. It's the exhaustion of attachment. You are pouring energy into people who are not meeting you where you stand. And the Buddha was clear about this. What you cling to will eventually exhaust you. Peace does not begin when others change. Peace begins the moment you stop chasing. 1. Attachment is the root of your exhaustion. In Buddhism, attachment is not love. That's the first misunderstanding you need to drop. Love is open. Attachment is tight. Love allows movement. Attachment demands control. Attachment is dependence disguised as care. It tells a convincing lie. It says, "I just care deeply," when in reality it means, "I need you to behave a certain way so I can feel okay." That need is where the exhaustion begins. When you chase people, you are not acting from compassion. Compassion is calm, patient, and grounded. Chasing is anxious. It's hurried. It's heavy. You are acting from fear. Fear of being ignored. Fear of being replaced. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of not being enough on your own. These fears don't scream, they whisper. They show up as overthinking, over-explaining, over-giving, and constantly checking whether you still matter. And every one of those behaviors drains energy. The Buddha taught that attachment creates dukkha, which means suffering. Not dramatic suffering, not obvious pain, but a subtle, grinding dissatisfaction that never quite leaves. The kind that sits in your chest when you wake up. The kind that makes rest feel impossible even when you're not doing anything. This suffering does not come from other people being cruel or unkind. It comes from asking them to carry a responsibility that was never theirs. You are demanding from them what only inner clarity, stability, and self-awareness can give. Think about what happens internally when you're attached to someone's response. Your mood rises and falls based on their tone. Your sense of worth shifts based on how quickly they reply. Your peace becomes conditional. Conditional peace is fragile peace. It breaks easily. The moment your peace depends on someone else's response, you have already lost control. Not because you're weak, but because you handed your emotional steering wheel to someone who is busy driving their own life. And your body knows this long before your mind admits it. Your shoulders tighten. Your breath becomes shallow. Your sleep becomes lighter. Your thoughts repeat themselves in loops. That's why you feel drained. Not because you're doing too much physically, but because your nervous system is constantly on alert. Attachment keeps you in a state of quiet vigilance, always waiting, always monitoring, always hoping. Buddhism teaches that clinging is a refusal to accept impermanence. Everything changes. People change. Feelings change. Situations change. Attachment says, "This must stay the same, or I will suffer." Reality says, "Change is unavoidable." That conflict is exhausting. When you attach, you are not present. You are projecting yourself into an imagined future. You are trying to secure outcomes before they arrive. You are rehearsing conversations that may never happen. This mental activity burns energy without producing peace. Here's the brutal truth most people avoid. Attachment feels like effort because it is effort. You are constantly trying to maintain something that is naturally fluid. You are trying to pin down what cannot be pinned. Compassion does not chase. Compassion observes. It allows people to be who they are without trying to pull them closer or push them away. Attachment cannot do that. Attachment interferes. This is why attachment exhausts you, while love does not. Love says, I care, but I can breathe without you. Attachment says, if you pull away, I collapse. One is sustainable. The other burns you out. The Buddha did not teach detachment to make people cold or distant. He taught detachment to free the mind from unnecessary suffering. Detachment means you stop confusing connection with dependence. You stop tying your sense of self to someone else's behavior. When you stop chasing, something uncomfortable happens at first. Silence, space, uncertainty. Your mind panics because it no longer has something to cling to. This is the withdrawal phase of attachment. Most people run back at this point. They chase again just to stop the discomfort. But if you stay still, if you don't move toward the fear, something else happens. Your breathing slows. Your thoughts begin to separate from each other. Your attention comes back into your body. You start realizing how much energy was leaking outward, how much life force you were spending trying to be chosen instead of choosing yourself. Attachment exhausts you because it keeps you leaning forward emotionally, always reaching, always extending yourself beyond balance. Buddhism calls this imbalance, the cause of suffering for a reason. A mind that leans too far in one direction cannot rest. Peace begins the moment you stop demanding emotional certainty from others. The moment you stop negotiating your worth through attention, replies, or reassurance. The moment you allow people to move freely without following them. That is not indifference. That is wisdom. And wisdom, unlike attachment, does not drain you. It stabilizes you. 2. Chasing people is a form of self-abandonment. Chasing people rarely looks like self-betrayal at first. It often wears a more acceptable mask. It looks like being understanding, being patient, being flexible, or being the one who always gives the benefit of the doubt. But beneath that surface, something quiet and damaging is happening. Every time you chase someone, you step away from yourself. In Buddhism, the path is not about self-erasure, it is about right alignment. Right alignment means your actions, your thoughts, and your inner values are moving in the same direction. Chasing people breaks that alignment because it forces you to move against your own inner signals. You feel discomfort, imbalance, or disrespect, yet you override those signals in order to maintain connection. This is where self-abandonment begins. When you chase someone, you start adjusting your behavior to avoid loss. You speak less honestly. You accept less than you need. You shrink your expectations and convince yourself that doing so is maturity or compassion. Over time, this pattern teaches your mind that your needs are negotiable, while other people's comfort is not. Buddhism teaches mindfulness of the self, not obsession with the self, but awareness of the internal state. That awareness becomes impossible when you are chasing. Your attention is no longer inward, noticing what feels right or wrong. It is outward, monitoring another person's reactions, moods, and availability. The more attention you place outside yourself, the more disconnected you become from your own center. This disconnection is exhausting because the mind is designed to rest in clarity, not in constant adjustment. When you chase, you are always adapting. You are reading signals, recalculating your words, second-guessing your instincts. There is no stability in that position. You are never fully present because you are always trying to maintain a bond that feels uncertain. Self-abandonment does not always mean dramatic sacrifice. Sometimes it means staying silent when something hurts. Sometimes it means continuing to give when there is no reciprocity. Sometimes it means waiting endlessly for effort that never arrives. Each of these choices sends a message inward. My comfort matters less than keeping this person close. The Buddha taught the middle path because extremes lead to suffering. Chasing people is an extreme. It is leaning so far toward others that you forget your own footing. You stop asking whether the relationship is balanced and start asking only how to prevent it from ending. In doing so, you trade self-respect for temporary reassurance. Over time, this erodes your sense of identity. You begin to define yourself by how useful, available, or agreeable you can be. Your worth becomes conditional, dependent on how well you can maintain connection. This is why chasing people often leads to resentment, even when you genuinely care. Resentment is the mind's response to prolonged self-neglect. Buddhism emphasizes non-attachment not as rejection, but as self-honoring. Non-attachment allows you to engage without losing yourself. Chasing does the opposite. It teaches you to tolerate imbalance and to call it loyalty. But loyalty that costs you your inner peace is not loyalty, it is fear. When you abandon yourself, your mind splits. One part knows something is wrong, another part keeps going anyway. That internal conflict drains energy faster than any physical effort. You feel tired, unfocused, emotionally heavy, yet you may not be able to explain why. The exhaustion comes from living out of alignment with your own truth. Stopping the chase feels uncomfortable because it forces you to face yourself again. It removes the distraction of pursuit and brings your attention back to your inner state. At first, this can feel like loss. In reality, it is a return. You begin to notice what you need, what you tolerate, and what you have been ignoring. Buddhism does not ask you to withdraw from people. It asks you to stop abandoning yourself for them. When you stand in alignment with your own values, relationships either adjust or fall away. Both outcomes are forms of clarity. Chasing people may feel like connection, but it is often a slow departure from yourself. The moment you stop chasing, you stop leaving your own center, and that is where your energy begins to return. 3. Desire creates restlessness, not connection. In Buddhism, desire is often misunderstood. People hear the word and assume it means ambition, passion, or wanting a better life. That is not what the Buddha was pointing to. The desire that creates suffering is craving. Craving is the mental insistence that something outside you must change for you to feel settled inside. When you chase people, you are operating entirely from craving. Craving does not relax. It cannot. It is future-oriented by nature. It keeps your attention locked on what is missing rather than what is present. When you crave someone's attention, reassurance, or consistency, your mind is no longer where your body is. You are physically here, but mentally you are somewhere else, waiting for a message, a reaction, a sign that you matter. This is where restlessness begins. You might call it thinking, but it is not clear thinking. It is repetitive, circular, and unresolved. You replay conversations. You analyze tone. You imagine explanations. You prepare responses to things that have not even happened yet. None of this creates connection. It creates agitation. The Buddha taught that a restless mind cannot see reality clearly. Restlessness clouds perception. When you are craving connection, you are not meeting the person as they are. You are meeting them as a solution to your discomfort. That subtle shift changes everything. You stop listening fully. You stop responding authentically. You start maneuvering. Connection requires presence. Craving destroys presence. When you chase someone, your energy becomes scattered. Part of your attention is on your current moment, but most of it is projected forward. Will they respond? Will they stay? Will they choose me? A mind split across time cannot rest. This is why craving is exhausting even when nothing outwardly stressful is happening. Buddhism teaches that peace exists only in the present moment, not as a concept, but as a lived experience. The breath is always here, the body is always here. Craving pulls you out of that immediacy. It makes the present feel insufficient. It convinces you that relief is just one response away. But relief that depends on someone else is temporary by definition. You might get the reply, you might get the reassurance. For a moment, the tension drops. But because the craving was never resolved, it returns, stronger. Now you need consistency, then exclusivity, then certainty. This is how desire escalates. It is never satisfied for long. This is not because you are needy. It is because craving feeds on uncertainty, and chasing people guarantees uncertainty. The Buddha warned that craving binds the mind. It ties your emotional state to conditions you cannot control. Other people's moods, priorities, and inner worlds are not stable ground. Building your peace on them ensures instability. Real connection is quiet. It does not rush. It does not grip. It does not require constant reassurance. It allows space without panic. Craving cannot tolerate space. Silence feels like rejection. Distance feels like danger. The mind fills that space with stories, most of them painful. When you stop chasing, the mind initially becomes louder. This is important to understand. Many people assume something is wrong when this happens. In reality, you are simply hearing the noise that was always there but was previously masked by action. Chasing gave your restlessness something to do. Stopping removes the distraction. Buddhism does not teach you to suppress desire. It teaches you to observe it without obeying it. When you observe craving, you see its pattern. You notice how it promises relief but delivers tension. You notice how it keeps you leaning forward emotionally, unable to settle into yourself. As you stop feeding craving, something unexpected happens. Your attention returns to your body. Your breath becomes slower. Your thoughts become less urgent. You start experiencing connection differently. You no longer look to others to regulate your inner state. You meet them from steadiness rather than need. This is where real connection becomes possible. Connection born from restlessness is fragile. Connection born from presence is stable. When you are present, you do not chase because there is nothing to run from inside yourself. You allow relationships to unfold naturally. Some deepen, some fade. Neither outcome threatens your peace. Desire tells you that connection is something to be secured. Buddhism teaches that connection is something that arises when the mind is still enough to receive it. Chasing people keeps the mind restless. Letting go of craving does not mean giving up on connection. It means finally creating the conditions where connection can exist without exhausting you. 4. People feel it when you chase and they pull away. This is the part most people resist because it forces honesty. Not moral honesty, but psychological honesty. When you chase people, they feel it, not always in words, not always consciously, but they feel it in the atmosphere of the interaction. In Buddhism, there is a deep understanding that human beings are sensitive to intention. Intention shapes energy, tone, posture, silence, and timing. You cannot hide need behind politeness forever. You cannot disguise craving as kindness indefinitely. Eventually, it leaks through. When you chase, there is an underlying message being transmitted, even if you never say it out loud. That message is pressure. It says, "I need you to respond in a certain way so I can feel settled." That pressure may be subtle, but it changes the dynamic immediately. People instinctively move away from pressure. This does not make them cruel. It makes them human. Buddhism teaches that clinging creates resistance. The tighter the grip, the stronger the pushback. This is not a rule you can negotiate with. It is a psychological law. When someone feels chased, they feel burdened with responsibility for your emotional state, even if you never ask them to carry it explicitly. And most people do not want that responsibility, so they pull back. They reply slower. They become less expressive. They create distance. From your side, this feels like rejection. From their side, it feels like self-protection. The tragedy is that chasing often begins because of distance, but it ends up creating more of it. When you chase, the interaction stops being mutual. You are moving toward them while they are standing still or stepping away. That imbalance creates discomfort. Buddhism emphasizes balance because imbalance leads to suffering on both sides. One person feels anxious, the other feels crowded. You may believe that chasing proves care, but to the other person, it often feels like expectation. Expectation without agreement is experienced as pressure. Pressure drains desire. It drains curiosity. It drains warmth. This is why chasing rarely creates closeness. It creates obligation. The Buddha taught that attachment binds not only the one who clings, but also the one being clung to. When you attach to someone, you limit their freedom, even if only emotionally. People sense this limitation and instinctively resist it. Freedom is deeply tied to peace, and when people feel their freedom narrowing, they pull away to restore it. Another uncomfortable truth is that chasing reverses polarity. When you chase, you lower your position in the dynamic, not because you are inferior, but because you have surrendered your grounding. You are no longer walking your own path, you are following theirs. This changes how you are perceived. Those who walk ahead of you do not turn back for someone who is chasing, they turn back for someone who is walking beside them. This is not about dominance or ego, it is about alignment. When two people move at the same pace, connection feels natural. When one person runs to keep up, the relationship feels strained. Buddhism teaches that effortlessness is a sign of right action. When something requires constant force, constant reassurance, constant pursuit, it is already out of harmony. Chasing is force. And force, even when motivated by care, disrupts harmony. From the chaser's perspective, this dynamic is deeply confusing. You give more, explain more, show up more, yet receive less. This feels unfair. But Buddhism does not frame reality in terms of fairness. It frames it in terms of cause and effect. The cause is clinging. The effect is withdrawal. People do not pull away because you are unworthy. They pull away because the interaction no longer feels free. When you stop chasing, something powerful shifts. The pressure dissolves. The other person is no longer managing your expectations. They are simply experiencing you. Some will step forward again. Others will continue to walk away. Both outcomes reveal truth. Buddhism values truth over comfort. Chasing keeps you in illusion, believing that effort can replace alignment. Letting go removes the illusion. It shows you who stays when there is no pressure, no pursuit, no emotional debt. This is not rejection, it is clarity. And clarity, even when painful, is far less exhausting than chasing shadows. When you stop chasing, you stop interfering with natural movement. You allow people to move according to who they are, not according to your fear. In that space, real connection either returns or releases you. Either way, your peace is no longer hostage to pursuit. 5. Detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. One of the biggest lies people believe about detachment is that it makes you distant, uncaring, or emotionally numb. That misunderstanding keeps many people trapped in exhaustion because they equate clinging with love and fear that letting go means becoming heartless. Buddhism teaches the opposite. Detachment is not the absence of care, it is the absence of confusion. Detachment is clarity. When you are attached, your perception is distorted. You don't see people as they are. You see them through the lens of what you hope they will give you. You interpret silence as rejection, distance as abandonment, and independence as a threat. None of this is clarity. It is projection fueled by fear. Detachment removes that distortion. In Buddhism, detachment means releasing the demand that reality conform to your emotional needs. It means allowing people to be who they are without trying to shape them into emotional anchors. This does not reduce love, it purifies it. Love without attachment is steady. Love with attachment is anxious. When you detach, you stop forcing outcomes. You stop trying to control how others feel, respond, or choose. Control is exhausting because it is a battle you cannot win. Other people have their own minds, histories, and priorities. Attachment keeps you locked in resistance to that truth. Detachment accepts it. This acceptance is not passive, it is intelligent. Detachment creates space between stimulus and reaction. Someone pulls back, and instead of panic, there is observation. Someone disappoints you, and instead of chasing, there is reflection. This space is where clarity lives. Without it, you are always reacting, never choosing. Many people confuse detachment with withdrawal, but Buddhism draws a clear distinction. Withdrawal is avoidance. Detachment is presence without dependence. You can be fully engaged while remaining internally stable. You can care deeply without tying your sense of safety to another person's behavior. When you are detached, your nervous system settles. You are no longer scanning for signs, decoding messages, or bracing for emotional shifts. Your energy returns to your body instead of leaking outward. This is why detachment feels like relief after the initial discomfort passes. At first, detachment can feel empty. This scares people. They mistake the absence of emotional noise for the absence of meaning. In reality, what disappears is not connection, but obsession. What fades is not love, but tension. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises when we resist what is. Detachment removes resistance. It allows experiences to arise and pass without gripping them. People come closer. People move away. Neither movement destabilizes you because your center is no longer external. With detachment, you begin to see relationships clearly. You notice who meets you with effort and who requires pursuit. You see patterns instead of excuses. This clarity can be uncomfortable because it removes denial, but it also restores dignity. Detached people are not cold, they are grounded. They listen better because they are not waiting for reassurance. They respond more honestly because they are not afraid of loss. Their presence feels calm because it is not loaded with expectation. This is why detachment often increases respect. People feel safe around those who are not trying to extract something from them emotionally. There is no pressure to perform, reassure, or reciprocate at a specific pace. The interaction becomes clean. Buddhism does not teach detachment to make you indifferent to life. It teaches detachment so you can engage without suffering unnecessarily. When you are detached, you still feel joy, sadness, connection, and loss. The difference is that these experiences move through you instead of consuming you. Detachment allows you to love without losing yourself. It allows you to walk away without hatred. It allows you to stay without fear. This balance is what Buddhism points toward again and again. When you stop chasing, detachment naturally arises, and with it comes clarity. You see that peace was never about holding tighter. It was about seeing clearly enough to let go without bitterness. Detachment is not shutting down your heart. It is finally freeing your mind. 6. When you stop chasing, you return to the present moment. Chasing people pulls your mind out of the present almost completely. Even when your body is sitting still, your attention is rarely where you are. It is somewhere else, imagining outcomes, anticipating responses, replaying conversations, or preparing for explanations that may never be needed. Buddhism teaches that this disconnection from the present moment is one of the core causes of suffering. The present moment is not dramatic. It does not beg for attention. It simply exists. But chasing teaches the mind to reject what is happening now in favor of what might happen later. You begin to live in a constant state of anticipation. This anticipation feels like hope on the surface, but underneath it is anxiety. In Buddhism, the present moment is the only place where peace can be experienced directly, not remembered, not planned, experienced. When you chase people, you postpone peace. You tell yourself that calm will arrive once something external changes, once someone responds differently, once a situation resolves. This belief quietly trains the mind to stay restless. Chasing turns your inner world into a waiting room. You wait for validation. You wait for reassurance. You wait for signs that you matter. While waiting, your awareness drifts away from your breath, your body, and your immediate experience. You stop noticing how tense your jaw is, how shallow your breathing has become, how your thoughts are racing. Buddhism places great emphasis on mindfulness of the body because the body always lives in the present moment. The mind, when chasing, abandons it. When you stop chasing, the first thing you notice is discomfort. Silence can feel loud. Space can feel threatening. This is not because something is wrong, but because the mind is no longer distracted by pursuit. For the first time, you are face to face with your inner state. Buddhism does not ask you to escape this discomfort. It asks you to observe it. As you observe, you begin to notice something important. The discomfort rises and falls on its own. It does not require action to resolve it. It requires attention. As your attention returns to the present moment, your nervous system begins to recalibrate. Your breathing slows. Your muscles soften. Your thoughts lose urgency. You are no longer preparing for something that might happen. You are simply here. This is where many people realize how much energy they were spending living in imagined futures. Chasing keeps you mentally ahead of yourself, always leaning forward. Stopping allows you to stand upright again. The mind begins to settle because it is no longer being pulled in multiple directions. Buddhism teaches that awareness itself is healing. When you are present, you are no longer arguing with reality. You are no longer resisting what is happening. This acceptance does not mean you approve of everything. It means you stop fighting the moment you are in. In the present moment, your worth is not up for negotiation. You are not being evaluated. You are not waiting to be chosen. You are simply existing. This is deeply stabilizing because it removes the constant measurement of self against others. As presence deepens, you begin to experience connection differently. You listen more fully. You speak more honestly. You notice when something feels aligned and when it does not. These signals were always there, but chasing drowned them out. Stopping the chase does not mean you stop caring about people. It means you stop abandoning the present moment for imagined outcomes. Relationships become something you participate in, not something you pursue. Effort becomes mutual, or it becomes irrelevant. Buddhism emphasizes that suffering comes from clinging to impermanent things as if they were stable. The present moment is stable because it is always here. When you return to it, you return to something you can actually inhabit. Peace is not found by securing people. It is found by inhabiting the moment fully. When you stop chasing, you stop postponing your life. You stop living in response to imagined futures. You come back to your breath, your body, and your immediate experience. And in that return, something simple and profound happens. You realize that peace was never waiting for someone else. It was waiting for your attention. 7. Peace begins when you walk your own path. Chasing people pulls you off your own path long before you realize it. At first, it feels harmless. You adjust your pace slightly. You wait a little longer. You compromise a little more. But over time, those small adjustments turn into a full detour away from your own direction. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises when you live out of alignment with your true path, and chasing others is one of the quietest ways this misalignment begins. Walking your own path does not mean isolating yourself from people. It means moving through life guided by clarity rather than fear. When you chase, fear becomes the compass. Fear of loss, fear of being alone, fear of missing out. That fear dictates your decisions, your energy, and your focus. You stop asking where you are going and start asking who might leave. This is how peace erodes. In Buddhism, peace is not something you acquire. It is something that emerges naturally when your actions are aligned with your inner truth. When you chase people, your actions are no longer aligned with truth. They are aligned with anxiety. You move not because it feels right, but because stopping feels threatening. Walking your own path requires stillness. Stillness reveals direction. Chasing destroys stillness. It keeps you in motion without meaning. You are busy, emotionally active, constantly engaged, yet internally stagnant. This is why so many people feel exhausted while making no real progress in their lives. When you stop chasing, life becomes quieter. This quiet is not emptiness, it is space. Space to notice what you actually value, space to see what drains you and what nourishes you, space to recognize which relationships flow naturally and which require force. Buddhism teaches that effort should feel balanced, not strained. When you walk your own path, effort has a rhythm. There is movement and rest, giving and receiving, speaking and listening. Chasing has no rhythm. It is constant forward pressure with no grounding. Walking your own path also means accepting that not everyone will walk with you. This acceptance is difficult because the ego equates separation with failure. Buddhism reframes separation as impermanence. People enter your life for seasons, lessons, or companionship, not ownership. When you chase, you resist this truth. When you walk your path, you honor it. Some people will drift away when you stop chasing. This is not a loss of connection, it is the loss of illusion. Those who needed your pursuit to stay were never walking beside you. They were being pulled. Peace cannot exist where force is required. Others may draw closer when you stop chasing. Without pressure, they can finally see you clearly. But even this outcome is not the goal. The goal is alignment, not attachment to who stays or who leaves. Walking your own path restores dignity. You no longer measure your worth by responses, attention, or consistency from others. You measure it by how honestly you live, how clearly you choose, and how deeply you respect your own inner signals. Buddhism emphasizes self-awareness as liberation. When you walk your path, you are aware of your limits. You know when to step forward and when to step back. You no longer chase what resists you. You no longer beg for what does not align. This does not make you rigid, it makes you grounded. Grounded people are not passive, they act, but their actions come from clarity, not urgency. They invite connection instead of pursuing it. They allow relationships to form naturally instead of forcing them into existence. Peace begins when your energy stops running outward and starts circulating inward. When your attention returns to your values, your direction, and your present life. When you stop trying to keep people close and start keeping yourself whole. Walking your own path is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is steady. It is deeply powerful. And it changes everything without needing to announce itself. You do not need to chase to be chosen. You need to walk clearly enough for the right people to recognize your direction. Peace does not arrive when others finally meet you. It arrives when you stop leaving yourself to follow them. 8. Letting go is not loss. It is the end of unnecessary suffering. Most people resist letting go because they misunderstand what they are losing. They believe they are losing love, connection, history, or meaning. Buddhism offers a sharper perspective. What you are actually letting go of is resistance. And resistance is what creates suffering. Letting go does not mean erasing people from your memory or pretending they never mattered. It means releasing the internal struggle against reality. It means stopping the argument with what already is. When you chase people, you are fighting impermanence. You are saying, "This must stay the same, or I will suffer." Letting go is the moment you stop making that demand. In Buddhism, suffering arises not from change, but from clinging to what changes. People leave, feelings shift, priorities evolve. None of this is personal, yet attachment makes it feel deeply personal. Letting go dissolves that illusion. It allows you to see movement as natural rather than threatening. This is why letting go feels painful at first. You are not grieving the person alone. You are grieving the expectations you attached to them. You are grieving the version of the future you imagined. You are grieving the effort you invested, hoping it would turn into certainty. That grief is real, but it is temporary. The suffering created by clinging is ongoing. When you let go, your mind initially searches for something else to hold. This is habit. The mind is conditioned to cling. Buddhism does not judge this tendency, it observes it. If you do not immediately replace one attachment with another, the mind begins to settle on its own. The urgency fades. The emotional spikes soften. You start experiencing space. This space is not emptiness. It is freedom from unnecessary weight. Letting go restores energy because you are no longer resisting reality. Resistance is effort. Acceptance is release. When you stop chasing, stop clinging, and stop demanding, your system relaxes. You are no longer bracing against what you cannot control. Buddhism teaches that peace is not found by holding on tighter, but by loosening the grip. The tighter you cling, the more fragile you become. The looser your grip, the more resilient you grow. Letting go does not weaken you. It stabilizes you. You begin to notice how much of your suffering came not from what happened, but from your refusal to accept it. When that refusal ends, peace does not explode into your life. It enters quietly, through deeper breaths, through clearer thinking, through the absence of constant inner negotiation. Letting go also restores trust. Not blind trust in people, but trust in yourself. Trust that you can survive change. Trust that you do not collapse when someone leaves. Trust that your life continues even when expectations fall apart. This self-trust is what chasing slowly erodes and letting go rebuilds. In Buddhism, liberation is not dramatic. It is subtle. It is the end of unnecessary suffering. Letting go is not about giving up on life. It is about giving up the struggle against it. You are not losing people when you let go. You are losing the weight of clinging. And in that release, peace finally has space to exist. 9. You were never meant to be chased or to chase. One of the deepest insights Buddhism offers is this: life is not a hunt, it is a flow. The moment you turn relationships into something that must be pursued or secured, you turn living into struggling. Chasing assumes scarcity. It assumes that connection is rare, fragile, and must be captured before it escapes. This belief quietly poisons peace. You were never meant to chase people, and you were never meant to be chased either. Healthy connection does not require pursuit. It arises naturally when two paths run parallel for a time. Buddhism teaches that forcing what is not aligned creates suffering because it violates the nature of reality. Things that belong together do not need to be forced together. When you chase, you treat connection like proof of worth. If they stay, you matter. If they pull away, something must be wrong with you. This belief is false, but it feels convincing when attachment is present. Buddhism dismantles this illusion by reminding you that worth is not granted externally, it is inherent. It does not increase with attention or decrease with distance. Chasing people conditions the mind to believe that love must be earned through effort, patience, or endurance. Over time, this belief shapes your identity. You become someone who waits, hopes, tolerates, and adapts endlessly. This is not humility. It is conditioning born from fear of loss. Buddhism teaches that what is natural does not strain. A river does not chase the ocean. It flows toward it. In the same way, relationships that are meant to exist move toward mutuality without pressure. When effort is one-sided, it is a sign not of devotion, but of misalignment. Being chased is no healthier than chasing. It creates imbalance in the opposite direction. One person becomes the source of validation. The other becomes dependent. Buddhism rejects both positions because both create suffering. One is anxious, the other is burdened. Neither is free. Freedom is the foundation of peace. When you stop chasing, you begin to understand this truth at a deeper level. You stop trying to pull people closer and stop fearing when they move away. You allow relationships to reveal themselves instead of trying to control their shape. Some connections deepen naturally, others dissolve quietly. Neither outcome defines you. This shift changes how you move through the world. You no longer rush emotionally. You no longer overextend to secure closeness. You offer presence, honesty, and consistency, but you do not bargain with your self-respect to keep someone near. Buddhism teaches that suffering ends when illusion ends. The illusion here is that connection must be chased to be real. Once that illusion dissolves, peace becomes possible. Not because you have fewer relationships, but because the ones you have are no longer built on fear. You were never meant to live in pursuit of people. You were meant to walk your path and allow those aligned with it to walk beside you. When you stop chasing, life does not become empty. It becomes honest. And honesty, more than attachment, is what allows peace to finally settle in. 10. Exhaustion ends when you stop trying to be chosen. At the deepest level, chasing people is not about them. It is about an unconscious belief that you must be chosen in order to be at peace. This belief is subtle, but it shapes everything. It tells you that your value is provisional, that it depends on approval, consistency, or commitment from someone else. Buddhism directly challenges this belief because it is one of the most exhausting illusions the mind can carry. The need to be chosen creates constant inner tension. You are never fully relaxed, even in moments of connection, because part of you is always monitoring whether it will last. You look for signs of reassurance, You interpret small changes as threats. You prepare emotionally for loss before it happens. This vigilance is not strength, it is survival mode. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises when the self is constructed around conditions. When you believe your worth depends on being chosen, you turn relationships into tests you must pass repeatedly. Every interaction becomes an evaluation. Every silence becomes a verdict. Living this way drains your energy because the mind is never allowed to rest. You were not meant to audition for belonging. The Buddha's teaching points inward, not outward. Peace does not come from being selected, prioritized, or secured by others. It comes from understanding your own nature clearly enough that approval is no longer a requirement for stability. This does not make connection meaningless. It makes it lighter. When you stop trying to be chosen, you stop negotiating your identity. You stop reshaping yourself to fit what you think others want. You speak more honestly because you are no longer afraid of losing favor. You set boundaries because your sense of self is no longer fragile. This is not arrogance, it is grounding. Trying to be chosen keeps you in comparison. You measure yourself against others, against expectations, against imagined standards. Buddhism teaches that comparison is a form of ignorance because it pulls the mind away from direct experience. You stop inhabiting your life and start judging it. This judgment is exhausting. As you release the need to be chosen, something shifts internally. Your nervous system begins to trust that you will survive disconnection. This trust is essential. Without it, the mind clings. With it, the mind opens. You no longer chase reassurance because you are no longer terrified of absence. This does not mean rejection stops hurting. It means rejection stops defining you. Buddhism does not promise a life without loss. It promises a mind that does not collapse when loss occurs. When you stop trying to be chosen, you stop making your peace dependent on permanence. You accept that relationships arise and pass, and that your life continues regardless. Exhaustion fades when effort becomes honest. You no longer spend energy performing, proving, or persuading. You give where there is flow and step back where there is resistance. This discernment is wisdom, not withdrawal. At this point, connection changes. You attract relationships that are based on mutual presence rather than pursuit. People engage with you not because you chase them, but because your energy is no longer asking to be validated. This is deeply calming for both sides. The Buddha taught that liberation begins when craving ends. The craving to be chosen is one of the deepest cravings there is. When it loosens its grip, peace does not arrive as excitement, it arrives as steadiness. You are no longer tired because you are no longer chasing confirmation of your worth. You were never meant to be chosen to be whole. You were meant to recognize your wholeness and let connection arise naturally from there. And that is where exhaustion finally ends. You were never exhausted because you cared too much. You were exhausted because you were carrying a burden that was never meant to be yours. The burden of securing people. The burden of maintaining closeness through effort. The burden of believing that your peace depended on someone else staying the same. Buddhism does not teach you to detach from life. It teaches you to detach from illusions. The illusion that love requires chasing. The illusion that worth must be proven. The illusion that letting go means losing yourself. In truth, letting go is how you return to yourself. When you stop chasing people, you stop fighting impermanence. You stop resisting change. You stop arguing with reality. And the moment that resistance ends, suffering begins to loosen its grip. Not all pain disappears, but the unnecessary weight does. Peace does not arrive as a dramatic breakthrough. It enters quietly, through calmer breathing, through clearer thinking, through the absence of constant inner tension. You begin to feel rested, Not because life is easy, but because you are no longer at war with it. Some people will walk away when you stop chasing. Let them. Others may step closer. Let them. Neither outcome defines your worth or determines your direction. What matters is that you are no longer abandoning yourself to keep someone else near. Peace begins when you stop chasing people because peace was never waiting for them. It was waiting for you to stop running.